When Donald Trump pulled over that summer afternoon, he didn't expect a cup of lemonade to change anything. He was between meetings. No cameras, no fanfare, just a quiet back road off Route 73 with cracked asphalt and swaying cornfields. His driver was running late, and Trump, restless in the back seat of the black SUV, had asked to step out for air. That's when he saw it. A cardboard sign half falling over. Lemonade, 25 cents. The boy behind the stand looked about 10. Dirty sneakers, a sunburned neck, and eyes that had seen too much for someone that young. Trump walked over, wearing sunglasses and a windbreaker. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. To the boy, he was just another stranger on a hot day. The pitcher was nearly empty. The sign was duct-taped to an old rake. A jar sat on the table, barely filled. The boy looked up. "Want some?" Trump nodded. "Sure, kid." The boy poured the last bit into a cup and handed it over. Trump tasted it. Sweet, but not too sweet. He smiled. "That's good lemonade?" The boy didn't say much, just looked down. Trump noticed the sign next to the jar. It wasn't part of the stand. It was a school folder turned inside out. In marker, it read, "Raising money for Dad's cancer." The words were smudged, like they'd been rained on. Trump's expression didn't change, but something in him did. He leaned forward. "What's your name?" "Mikey," the boy said. "Your dad sick?" The boy nodded. "He's got a tumor. Mom says we gotta do what we can." Trump asked nothing more. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He folded it quietly, stuck it under the jar, and said, "You keep working hard, Mikey. You're gonna go far." Mikey blinked. "That's way too much." Trump waved him off. "You're not charging enough." Then he turned, walked back to the SUV, and left. Mikey told his mom that night. She didn't believe him. "Just a nice man," she said. "Don't make up stories." But 2 days later, a package showed up. Inside was a brand new lemonade stand with an umbrella, real signage, and a note. "Keep going. You never know who's watching." D. That same day, Trump made a quiet phone call to an old friend in healthcare infrastructure. He didn't mention names, just said, "There's a kid. His dad's sick. They're out in Hilldale. Let's do something about it." That was all. Back in Hilldale, Mikey kept showing up. Every weekend, rain or shine, people started to notice. Someone from the local paper snapped a photo. The article ran under the title, "Lemonade and Love." Donations started coming in. Not millions, just enough. But Trump was watching from a distance, and he wasn't done. 1 week later, Mikey's mom got a call from a cancer institute in Houston. They offered a fully covered treatment plan, transportation, housing, everything. When she asked how they found them, the woman on the phone just said, "We had an anonymous referral." At the bottom of the itinerary was a tiny watermark, a logo from the Trump Organization, no explanation, no invoice, just taken care of. At the next town council meeting, something strange happened. An attorney stood up and donated $50,000 to repair the local clinic. Then, a retired doctor offered to volunteer twice a week. Then a woman from D.C. donated a portable ultrasound machine. All of it anonymous. All of it traced loosely to one afternoon, one cup of lemonade, and one man who never asked for credit. Mikey's lemonade stand became a symbol. Kids made drawings of it. Churches talked about it in sermons. His dad got better. Slowly. And 1 year later, Hilldale had a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new wellness center. Mikey cut the ribbon. They gave him a plaque, but he didn't keep it. He mailed it away, to an address written only on a folded napkin left at his stand. Trump Tower, New York. A week later, Mikey found a note in his backpack. Handwritten, folded twice. It read, "You changed the town, kid. You just needed someone to believe in you. Donald." The note in Mikey's backpack changed everything. He didn't know how it got there. His mom hadn't packed it. The teacher didn't mention it. It was just there one Monday morning, wedged between his math book and a half-eaten granola bar. Folded twice, written in blue ink. "You changed the town, kid. You just needed someone to believe in you. Donald." Mikey stared at it for a long time. His fingers gripped the paper like it was a golden ticket. He didn't show anyone. Not at first. He kept it in his lunchbox, between the napkin and the plastic spoon. When he took it out and read it again at recess, something inside him shifted. It was the first time in his life he felt seen. The principal heard about it a few days later. Mikey's teacher mentioned the new lemonade stand and the community buzz. But she also mentioned the letter. "Do you think it's really him?" the principal asked. "I don't know," the teacher replied, "but the kid believes it, and frankly, I think that's enough." Meanwhile, Donald Trump was back in New York. Quiet meetings, phone calls, no interviews, no tweets. He wasn't looking for press. What he was doing now was different. He had seen something in that boy that he hadn't seen in a while. Raw determination. No excuses. Just grit. The kind of spirit this country was built on. And he wasn't about to let it go unnoticed. He made a call to a friend in Ohio, a logistics guy. "Find me a supplier," Trump said. "Something small town. Good values. Something we can build around." The man delivered. Within 3 weeks, a truckload of branded Mikey's lemonade mix was ready to ship. Not for profit, not for shelves, for impact. Each box had a note inside. Hard work. Heart. That's the recipe. DT, the first shipment went to churches, shelters, and local grocery stores in rural towns. Each case free. Each one sparking curiosity. Back in Hilldale, Mikey was getting used to strangers waving at him. "You're the lemonade kid, right?" they'd say. He'd nod, awkward, but proud. His mom got calls from other parents. "My son wants to start a stand too," one said. "You think Mikey could talk to his class?" And so it started. Mikey became something he never expected to be, a symbol. Not because he had money, not because he was famous, but because one powerful man saw a moment and made it matter. The mayor invited Mikey to the county fair. "You're this year's junior grand marshal," he said. Mikey had to look up what that meant. His dad, still recovering but healthier now, helped him pick out a red, white, and blue tie. It was too long, so they folded the bottom behind his belt. At the parade, people clapped as he passed. Kids waved hand-drawn signs. "Go Mikey!" "Lemonade legend." One sign just said, "Thank you, Trump." That night, under the fair lights, Trump watched the parade replay on his iPad. No entourage, no camera crew, just him and the hum of a late-night office. He didn't smile much, but when Mikey walked by in that tie, waving with one hand, holding a lemonade cup in the other, Trump leaned forward and whispered, "That's what this is all about." Then he picked up the phone and said 4 words. "Get me the governor." 2 weeks later, Hilldale's mayor got a letter stamped from Albany. It included a new zoning exemption, a grant approval, and an offer for a rural small business accelerator program, starting with Hilldale. No one quite knew where it came from, but the mayor just grinned and said, "Sometimes the right people pull the right strings." Mikey's school held a student assembly. They gave him a certificate and a microphone. The gym was packed. Teachers, parents, kids from other towns. Mikey walked up, nervous. He looked out at the crowd and said only this: "I just wanted to help my dad, and someone helped me back." The place went quiet. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the room erupted. His mom cried in the front row. Later that day, the school janitor handed Mikey a folded envelope. "This was in the front office," he said. Mikey opened it. Inside was another note, same handwriting. "This country needs more kids like you, and more towns like Hilldale. Keep going. Donald." Word traveled fast after that second letter. The principal laminated it. The local news tried to cover it, but Trump's team issued no comment. Mikey didn't want to talk to the press anyway. He said the letters weren't for interviews. They were for him. Still, the buzz didn't stop. People from nearby towns came just to see the lemonade stand. Cars lined the edge of the road. A church group offered to build a permanent booth. A retired carpenter showed up with lumber and said, "Where do you want it?" One afternoon, a woman in a business suit stepped out of a black car. She handed Mikey's mom a folder. Inside were papers, legal ones, a formal trust, tax-free, under Mikey's name. "There's a donor," the woman said, "who believes in your son." His mom opened her mouth to speak, but the woman just smiled and added, "No strings, just belief." She never gave her name. Just got back in the car and left. The lawyer who reviewed the documents said it was airtight, clean, generous, unusual. At night, Mikey's dad would sit with him on the porch, still a little weak, still limping, but stronger. He'd sip tea and watch the sun go down and say things like, "People don't realize how fast things change. One minute, you're flat on your back. The next, your boy is out there changing the world with sugar, water, and guts." Mikey didn't say much back. He just smiled and sat a little taller. Meanwhile, in New York, Trump was watching. Quietly. He'd gotten used to the updates. His staff would slide a few photos across his desk. He wouldn't ask for them, but they kept coming. One photo showed Mikey helping a little girl with her sign. Another showed the new booth painted in red, white, and blue. And one photo, his favorite, showed Mikey and his dad hugging next to a handwritten sign that said, "Thank you, whoever you are." Trump kept that one, put it in a drawer at Mar-a-Lago. Then came the storm. A freak late summer lightning storm rolled through Hilldale. Winds snapped trees, power lines down, roads flooded. The new booth was torn apart. Mikey's family was safe, but shaken. And for the first time in months, the stand was gone. The town lost power. The community center roof peeled off. It felt like everything had been pushed back to zero. The next morning, Mikey went out to the curb and stood where the stand had been. Just dirt and splinters now. He stood there with his arms folded. He didn't cry. He didn't pout. He just looked at the ground, like he was trying to will it back into place. And then the trucks came. 3 of them. No logos. Just plain white with out-of-state plates. Workers got out. Quiet. Efficient. In their hands. Tools, plywood, paint cans, wires, even new solar panels. Nobody said much. They just got to work. Someone tried asking who sent them. One guy shrugged and said, "The big guy." Someone asked, "Which big guy?" He just pointed up. By sundown, the stand was rebuilt. Bigger, better, and bolted into the ground. Next to it, a brand new picnic bench. Fresh sod. 2 floodlights for night visibility. No sign of who paid for it. No invoice. But on the front of the new booth, etched into the wood with a wood burner, were 3 words: "Keep showing up." That night, Trump sat in silence, staring at a live stream clip someone had sent him. Mikey was back behind the counter. No fanfare, no camera crew, just him, his pitcher, and a homemade "We're Back" sign. Customers started returning. Someone brought brownies. Someone else handed Mikey a folded bill and said, "Tell your mystery friend, thank you." Trump chuckled. He reached for a notepad, scribbled something down, and handed it to a staffer. "Send this," he said, "but make sure it gets there like the others. Quiet. No return address." 3 days later, Mikey's mom opened the mailbox and found a plain white envelope. Inside was a typed message. Short. Simple. "Resilience is louder than the storm. So is love. Donald." The letter hit differently that time. It wasn't just about Mikey anymore. It was about the whole town. After the storm, something had shifted. People started talking to each other again. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years shared power cords. Churches opened basements for shelter. The fire chief cooked chili for 10 families without asking for thanks. Mikey's stand had become more than a stand. It was the anchor, the spark, the quiet reminder that even when the lights go out, community can still glow. A local contractor named Ray offered to build a small pavilion around the lemonade booth. "Stormproof," he said, "on the house." He showed up with his son and 2 hammers. By the end of the weekend, it was done. The pavilion had open slats, an American flag painted on the back panel, and a plaque mounted to the front. Nobody knew who wrote it. It just appeared one morning. It read, "Hope isn't something you find. It's something you pour." One afternoon, Mikey's mom got a call from a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was calm, polite. "Mrs. Wilkins," the man said, "we'd like to feature Mikey in a short documentary. About small-town America? About how good things still happen." She paused. "Does this have anything to do with—" The man interrupted. "We don't name names." "That's the point." She agreed. The crew came a week later. Quiet, respectful. They filmed Mikey handing out lemonade, his dad helping behind the scenes, local kids playing in the background. It aired on a small network but went viral within days. Comments poured in. "This gave me hope again. I cried watching this. This is what America used to be." One woman wrote, "This boy and his stand did more to unite people than most politicians have in years." Another wrote, "I don't know who helped him, but God bless that man." Trump read the comments, every one of them. He didn't respond. He didn't repost. He just read them and smiled. Then he made another call. "I want to set something up," he told his team, quietly. "Call it the Lemonade Grant, for kids. Stands, lawn mowing, paper routes, anything that teaches work ethic. Start small, make it real." Within weeks, the grant was up and running. 10 kids in 10 towns got envelopes in the mail. Inside was a check, a signed letter of encouragement, and a sticker that read, "Keep pouring." Mikey got his too. Not because he needed it, but because he'd earned it. His came with a handwritten P.S. "You're not just building a stand. You're building people." Meanwhile, the town of Hilldale was changing. The old diner reopened. The high school launched a mentorship program. A tech investor from Florida bought the abandoned gas station and turned it into a co-working hub for local teens. Nobody could trace where the spark started, but everyone knew it came after the lemonade stand, and everyone whispered the same thing. This all started with a cup. One night, Mikey sat with his dad under the pavilion. The stars were out. The wind was soft. "Do you ever wonder why he did it?" Mikey asked. His dad looked at him. "Because you reminded him of something," he said. "Maybe something he'd forgotten. Maybe something he never had." Mikey nodded. He didn't need more than that. Back in Florida, Trump sat on a patio with a notepad in hand. The Secret Service kept their distance. He liked it quiet. He drew a simple lemonade cup on the paper. Under it, he wrote 5 words. Small hands, big heart, huge impact. He tore it out and placed it in a folder marked Letters Never Sent. But one more was on the way. A white envelope arrived at Mikey's school 2 weeks later. His teacher handed it to him without a word. Mikey opened it slowly. Inside was a single typed sentence. You didn't just rebuild a stand. You rebuilt a town. That's what leaders do. Donald. The letter stayed in Mikey's pocket for days. He didn't want to show it to anyone, not because he was hiding it, but because it felt sacred, like a whisper meant only for him. He would unfold it at night, read the words again, then tuck it back into his jeans. You didn't just rebuild a stand. You rebuilt a town. That's what leaders do. Donald. Those last 3 words carried more weight than he could explain. At school, the other kids noticed something was different. He wasn't louder. He wasn't flashier. But there was a calm in him, a confidence, like he'd stepped into something bigger than himself. Meanwhile, in Washington, whispers had started. A senator had brought up a story during a committee meeting about a lemonade stand in a small rural town that rekindled the spirit of civic duty. He didn't mention names. He didn't need to. Others had heard of it too. A quiet staffer from the Department of Education drafted a memo titled Youth Enterprise as Civic Catalyst. It circulated quietly, but the message stuck. 1 act, 1 kid, 1 stand. And a country desperate for hope started paying attention. Back in Hilldale, Mikey was asked to speak at the annual town hall. The mayor personally invited him. Don't worry, he said, just speak from the heart. Mikey stood on the small stage in front of folding chairs and string lights. He looked out and saw farmers, school teachers, veterans, and kids who had once teased him but now clapped for him. He took a breath and said, I thought I was just selling lemonade. But maybe it was something more. Maybe we all needed something to believe in. The room fell silent. Then came the applause. Later that night, a man in a brown jacket approached Mikey. He didn't give his name. He didn't say where he was from. He just said, You ever think about running for student council? Mikey blinked. I'm only in 6th grade. The man smiled. That's usually where it starts. He handed Mikey a card. On the back was a quote from Proverbs. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Elsewhere, Trump was watching again. The video of Mikey's speech had reached him through 3 texts and 1 private email with the subject line. This is the America we miss. He watched it alone. No commentary, no notes. When Mikey said, Maybe we all needed something to believe in, Trump paused the video and rewound it. Then he leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a long time. That weekend, a truck pulled up to Hilldale Elementary with no branding. Inside were 20 boxes, books, supplies, gardening tools. One of the teachers found a note attached to the shovel handles. Teach them to plant something that outlives them. D. A few weeks later, the school started a garden club. Mikey was voted its first president. As fall set in, the stand kept going. Leaves fell around it. Sweaters replaced t-shirts. Hot lemonade became the new special. Mikey's dad, healthier now, built a small chalkboard sign that read, Faith, Family, Lemonade. A woman visiting from Texas offered to franchise the stand. Mikey politely declined. This isn't a brand, he said. It's a message. The message was spreading. Stories poured in. A girl in Nebraska started cookies for caregivers. A boy in Ohio began shoeshine Saturdays to raise money for his brother's surgery. All of them traced back to one headline: Boy raises funds for sick dad with lemonade stand. But what made them different wasn't just the stories. It was the signature on the folded notes they received, because someone was watching. Someone was still quietly funding, guiding, encouraging. The next surprise came at Christmas. A small wooden box arrived at the Wilkinses' doorstep. Inside was a snow globe. Inside the globe, a perfect model of Mikey's lemonade stand, complete with the flag, the bench, and the words, "Keep showing up," etched on the roof. Beneath it, a gold plate, "From a friend who believes." Mikey shook it and watched the glitter swirl. "He doesn't even know me," he said. His mom smiled. "Oh, honey," she said, "he knows exactly who you are." In Mar-a-Lago, Trump looked out at the ocean and nodded. "That kid," he said to himself, "reminds me what America's still made of." The snow globe stayed on the kitchen table all winter. Mikey would spin it every morning before school, and again before bed. Something about watching that little booth inside the glass calmed him. It reminded him that what happened was real, that people could care quietly and still move mountains. His mom dusted around it like it was a museum piece. His dad, stronger than ever now, would smile each time he passed by and say, "Small things matter more than people think." Word about Mikey's story had spread farther than anyone in Hilldale knew. A senator from Texas referenced it during a floor speech about rebuilding rural America. "If a boy with a lemonade stand can help lift a whole town," he said, "maybe we've been looking for heroes in the wrong places." That clip hit social media and went viral. Cable networks wanted interviews. Book publishers reached out. Morning shows called the school. But the Wilkins family said no to every single one. "We're not selling a story," Mikey's mom told a reporter. "We're living a life." Meanwhile, Trump was already on to the next part of his plan. The lemonade grant expanded. 50 more towns, 1,000 applications, each kid with a story, a dream, a need. He reviewed some personally. Others were sent by trusted staff. No press releases, no photo ops, just results. One boy in Idaho got boots and tools to fix lawnmowers. A girl in Alabama got seed money for a roadside jam stand. Each one came with a handwritten note, short and sweet. Keep building. Keep believing. DT. Back in Hilldale, something else was brewing. The mayor had nominated Mikey for the State Youth Medal of Service. It was the first time a kid from Hilldale had ever been put up for it. The ceremony would be in the Capitol. Suits, speeches, cameras. Mikey didn't know if he wanted to go. "I'm just a kid," he told his dad. "You're a kid who stood still when it mattered," his dad said. "Not everyone does." The day before they left for the Capitol, another package arrived. No return address. Inside was a navy blue blazer, a red tie, and a folded letter. The letter read, "Every leader needs a uniform. Even young ones. You've already earned it. Donald." Mikey tried it on. It fit perfectly. The ceremony was simple but powerful. A few speeches, some handshakes. Mikey stood on stage in front of state officials and a packed auditorium. When it was his turn to speak, he said just one thing. "I didn't try to be inspiring. I just didn't give up." The room stood. Some clapped, some cried. The governor shook Mikey's hand and leaned in close. "You have a guardian angel," he said softly. "He called me personally." Mikey blinked. "Who?" The governor smiled and whispered, "He asked me not to say." but let's just say he knows a thing or two about lemonade. That night, back at the hotel, Mikey looked out over the city lights and asked his dad, "Do you think he watches every single thing?" His dad took a deep breath. "I think he watches the things that matter." 3 weeks later, a plaque arrived at Hilldale Elementary. Brass, heavy, engraved with the words, "In honor of the ones who pour into others when no one is watching." It was signed at the bottom, "With pride, DT." The principal mounted it above the front office. Every student saw it walking in. Every visitor asked about it. And every teacher smiled when they explained. That spring, Hilldale saw a wave of firsts. The school's test scores hit state records. The PTA doubled in size. A youth robotics team formed in the basement of the church. Parents started showing up again. Coaches, volunteers, mentors, all sparked by something deeper than lemonade. One afternoon, as the sun set over the stand, Mikey sat alone with a cup in his hand. The wind rustled the flag. The light hit the gold trim on the booth just right. A car pulled up. Tinted windows. The passenger window rolled down. A man in sunglasses smiled. "Any lemonade left?" Mikey grinned. "Always." He handed over a cup. The man took a sip. "Still the best in the country." Then he winked and drove off. Mikey stood frozen. His heart thumped in his chest. He didn't know for sure, but something in his gut told him. That wasn't just any customer. That was him. And this time, he didn't leave a letter. Just a glance, a nod, and one last reminder. He's still watching. The next morning, Mikey couldn't stop thinking about the man in the car. He hadn't said his name. He hadn't needed to. Something about the way he nodded. The way he sipped that lemonade and drove off like he already knew everything. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a torch being passed. Like one leader saying to another, "Now, it's your turn." Mikey told his dad what happened. His dad smiled and didn't say much, just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "I think he was checking in." Back in New York, Trump reviewed a stack of handwritten letters. They weren't press requests or business memos. They were from kids. Dozens of them. Some with crayons, others in pencil. All of them thanking him. Telling him about their stands, their goals, their dreams. He read every one. Some he kept. Some he sent back with a short reply. But one stuck with him. A boy from Kansas had written, "I don't know what a president is supposed to do anymore, but I think helping people quietly is probably it." Trump read that line 3 times, then slid the letter into his inner coat pocket and carried it with him for days. Meanwhile, Hilldale was on fire, but not the kind that destroys, the kind that builds, the kind that spreads like revival. Churches were packed again. Local businesses reopened. Teachers stayed late. Veterans mentored students. What started as a lemonade stand had become a cultural reset. Not flashy, not loud, but rooted in service, honor, and belief that one person, even a kid, could start a chain reaction. Mikey's school launched something new that spring, the Keep Pouring program. 5th and 6th graders could apply for mini grants to fund small businesses or community projects. Lawn mowing, babysitting, dog walking, each one required a written plan and a commitment to give back in some way. The only thing the school required was that every stand, every service, post a small sign that said, "You are seen, you matter." Mikey had come up with that phrase on his own. The first round of applicants surprised everyone. A shy girl started a Books for Buddies table. A boy with a stutter launched a paper airplane contest and donated the winnings to the local VA clinic. A brother and sister team raised $800 selling chalk drawings at the farmer's market. When asked why they joined, most kids gave the same answer: because Mikey showed us how. One day, Mikey came home to find a letter waiting on the porch. No envelope, just a folded page weighed down with a single polished stone. It was typed. Simple. Movements don't come from crowds. They come from courage. You had it. You still do. Keep going. Donald. Mikey turned the stone over. It had been hand-carved with a small eagle and the number 45 on the bottom. His mom didn't ask. She just smiled and put it on the mantel next to the snow globe. Summer returned. The lemonade stand entered its third season. Mikey didn't need the money anymore. The bills were paid. The grant was secured. But he showed up anyway, because people still came. Not just for the drink, but for the reminder. The quiet, steady reminder that America hadn't gone anywhere. It was still there, in small towns, in front yards, in cardboard signs and sticky cups handed out by kids with big hearts and bigger grit. One afternoon, a busload of students from out of town stopped by. Their teacher had made Mikey's story part of the curriculum. Each kid stepped off the bus with a question. How did it start? Why did he keep doing it? What was the hardest part? Mikey answered each one patiently. Then a little girl in glasses raised her hand and asked, "Are you friends with the man who helped you?" Mikey paused, thought for a moment, then said, "He's not just my friend. He's everybody's. He just shows up when you least expect it." That night, Trump received a photo in the mail. No returns address. Just a picture of Mikey surrounded by the school kids, holding a lemonade cup and grinning like the future was already his. Trump held the photo in his hand for a long time. Then he opened his desk drawer, pulled out a folder labeled Legacy, and added the photo to the stack. Not because it was part of history, but because it was part of what mattered most. By midsummer, Mikey's name was known far beyond Hilldale. Not because of fame, not because of media attention, but because of the ripple effect. Other towns had started noticing the pattern. Wherever a child stepped up to build something simple and good, something changed. Not overnight, but steadily, quietly. A lemonade stand in Iowa raised enough to fund a local food bank. A cookie table in Georgia bought school supplies for a foster home. A bike repair booth in Pennsylvania brought veterans and teenagers together under one roof. All of them tied back to one boy. One cup. One choice to pull over on a hot summer day. Mikey never took credit. He'd say, "I'm just one person." But even he started to understand that leadership didn't always come with microphones or parades. Sometimes it came with consistency, with kindness, with showing up even when you didn't have to, especially then. The state capitol sent a letter announcing a new initiative called Youth Grit Grants. It was modeled after Hilldale's Keep Pouring program. The announcement listed Mikey as the honorary founder. He didn't know until the principal called him up in the middle of class and read the news over the intercom. The class erupted in cheers. Mikey sat frozen, blushing red. But in his heart, he felt something else. Purpose. Like the work wasn't over. Just beginning. That weekend, his dad got a letter too. This one came with a seal, not from the government, from Mar-a-Lago. It was short, typed. "You raised a good one, and you stayed strong when it mattered. That doesn't go unnoticed. Be proud." Donald! Mikey's dad read it 3 times before folding it carefully and sliding it into his wallet behind a picture of Mikey at 5 years old, wearing superhero pajamas and cowboy boots. The following week, the governor made a surprise visit to Hilldale. No press, no cameras, just a handshake and a tour. He visited the school garden, the lemonade stand pavilion, the plaque above the front office. He even tried a cup of lemonade himself. "Best I've had," he said with a smile. Before he left, he leaned toward Mikey and said, "This isn't just about drinks. You've built something a lot of grown-ups never could." Mikey didn't know how to answer, so he just nodded and handed the governor a "Keep Pouring" sticker. Meanwhile, Trump was finishing a quiet weekend meeting with donors in Florida. A staffer approached him with an update. "Sir," she said, "the Lemonade grant has helped over 700 kids now. We've gotten letters from teachers in all 50 states. Some are asking if you'll ever go public about this." Trump shook his head. "No," he said. "This isn't about press. This is about people." That same day, Mikey and his mom were cleaning out old boxes in the garage when they found the original Lemonade sign. The one written in marker. Faded now, still sticky from the duct tape. Mikey stared at it for a long time. "We should frame this," his mom said. "Not because of what it started, but because of what it survived." They hung it above the doorway in the kitchen. Summer gave way to fall. The leaves changed. The air cooled. But the traffic to the lemonade stand never stopped. Some came for the drink. Others came just to take pictures. Still others brought their kids to learn what it meant to work hard, serve quietly, and believe in more than yourself. Mikey welcomed them all, never turned anyone away, and always said, "Thank you." One afternoon, as Mikey was wiping down the counter, a little boy came up holding a crumpled dollar. He looked nervous, said it was his allowance. Mikey poured a cup and gave the boy 2 quarters back. The boy hesitated. "Don't you keep tips?" Mikey smiled and said, "You might need this for your own stand someday." The boy's face lit up. "Really?" Mikey nodded. "Just remember to help someone when you do." That night, Mikey got another letter. No envelope, just a piece of cardstock slipped under the door of the stand. It read, "You've become what most adults only dream of. A servant leader. Keep showing up. Keep pouring. Donald." Mikey folded the card and placed it beside the stone, the snow globe, and the original note with the $100 bill still paper-clipped to the corner. And for the first time in a long while, he realized he didn't just feel proud. He felt ready. The leaves turned gold, then brown, and the wind began to carry that first hint of winter. Mikey still showed up at the stand, now wearing a light jacket and gloves, pouring warm cider in place of lemonade. The sign changed, but the message didn't. A new one sat on the front. Still serving. Still believing. Customers kept coming, teachers, truckers, tourists who'd read about the town online. One man drove 6 hours just to shake Mikey's hand. He said, "I came to see what decency looks like again." Mikey didn't know what to say, so he gave the man an extra cup to take home. Meanwhile, something new was happening. Mikey's story had quietly inspired a small group of teachers and community leaders to start what they called the Quiet Servants Network. It wasn't public. It wasn't formal. Just people helping behind the scenes, covering a student's lunch bill, dropping off clothes at a shelter, helping a struggling dad fix his truck. Every act done quietly, anonymously. But each one traced back to the lemonade stand, the plaque at the school, the boy who kept pouring. One day, Mikey's teacher pulled him aside and showed him a folder. Inside were application papers, a prestigious leadership camp, summer program. Only 10 kids selected each year. Mikey blinked. "I don't think I'm supposed to go to places like that," he said. His teacher smiled. "You're exactly the kind of kid who should." Mikey hesitated. "What if I don't fit in?" She paused. then said, "Leaders never start by fitting in. They start by standing out." Back at Mar-a-Lago, Trump was reading a report, a handwritten update from one of his staffers who'd been quietly tracking the ripple effects of the Lemonade grant. She wrote, "Sir, the kids aren't just starting businesses. They're starting movements, quiet, humble, rooted in service." Trump leaned back in his chair. "That's the America I remember," he said. He pulled out a photo of Mikey, the one with the kids from the school bus, and pinned it to the corner of his office corkboard, right next to a folded napkin with the words, "Faith wins." Meanwhile, Mikey was still figuring things out. His dad was back to work. His mom had taken up volunteering at the town library. Life had stabilized, but Mikey knew something else was coming. Something beyond Hilldale. Something he couldn't quite name. He started keeping a small journal under his bed. It wasn't for feelings. It was for ideas. How to make the stand mobile. How to start keep pouring clubs in other schools. How to create a book of short stories from the people who came to his booth. He called it Hope on the Counter. One entry just said, "If a man like him believes in me, maybe I should too." Then came the invite. A sealed envelope, cream-colored, embossed, no return address. Just a gold eagle at the top and the words, "You are cordially invited." Inside was an invitation to a private gathering, hosted at a ranch in Texas. Attendees, young leaders, patriots, creators of good. The name at the bottom wasn't printed. It was signed by hand. Donald J. Trump. Mikey showed his parents. His mom covered her mouth. His dad looked like he'd seen a miracle. "You're going," he said. Mikey whispered, "But I've never been on a plane." His dad replied, "You've already been higher than most men will ever dream. You'll be fine." At the ranch, everything was quiet, peaceful. American flags swayed in the breeze. Long picnic tables stretched across the grass. Trump was already there when Mikey arrived. No podium, no reporters, just folding chairs and iced tea. When their eyes met, Trump smiled, opened his arms, said, "I was wondering how long it'd take for you to get here." They sat together under an oak tree. No big speech, no questions, just two people talking. Trump asked about the stand. Mikey asked about faith. Trump shared a story from his childhood. Mikey shared the first time he prayed for his dad's healing. They laughed. They listened. Trump handed Mikey a coin, a custom minted piece. One side had a lemonade cup. The other had the phrase, "Small things, big waves." Before Mikey left, Trump pulled him aside, looked him in the eyes. "You're not done," he said. "Not even close. The world doesn't need perfect. It needs real. It needs strong hearts and steady hands. And you've got both." Mikey flew home with the coin in his pocket. He didn't sleep on the plane. He stared out the window the whole way. Thinking, dreaming, planning. Because deep down, he knew something now. It hadn't just been about the lemonade. It had always been about the country. When Mikey stepped off that plane, something in him had changed. He wasn't just a kid with a lemonade stand anymore. He was a messenger, a steward of something bigger than himself. He didn't come home with cameras chasing him or reporters waiting at baggage claim. Just his backpack, a worn-out notebook full of scribbles, and the coin Trump had given him, heavy in his pocket and heavier in meaning. His mom hugged him tight. His dad looked him over and said, "You look taller." Mikey smiled. "Maybe I just feel taller." That night, he placed the coin on the stand's countertop. Taped next to it was the phrase Trump had spoken beneath the oak tree. "The world doesn't need perfect. It needs real." The next morning, he found 3 kids waiting by the booth before he even opened. They weren't there to buy. They were there to learn. "Can we help?" one asked. Mikey looked at them, saw their eyes full of hunger, not for lemonade, but for purpose, and said, "Sure. But first, tell me why you're here." One girl said, "Because people forgot how to be kind. I want to remember." Mikey handed her the ladle and said, "Then you're in the right place." Meanwhile, in a quiet office, Trump looked out across the lawn. The folders on his desk weren't campaign briefings or press requests. They were letters, more from kids, more from towns, all inspired by Mikey, by the stand, by one decision to pull over and say yes to something small. He held up a photo, Mikey and the new team of kids under the booth's overhang, working together like a tiny company. No one goofing off, everyone focused. The American flag draped behind them like a silent blessing. Trump turned to an aide and said, "This is what I ran for. Not the title, not the podium. This." Then he picked up his pen and wrote a single line at the bottom of the photo. "America starts here." Back in Hilldale, the Keep Pouring movement had taken on new life. Kids from surrounding counties visited weekly. Teachers began using Mikey's journal entries as writing prompts. A group of retired veterans offered to mentor students and maintain the garden. The stand wasn't just a booth anymore. It had become a headquarters, a chapel, a classroom, a symbol. People brought photos of loved ones and taped them to the sides. One woman left a folded note that read, "My son came back from war and didn't speak for months. He saw your story, and now he volunteers at the shelter. Thank you." Mikey read every note, every card, every scribbled sentence stuck to the booth. He never threw any of them away. He kept a box under the table labeled Proof. When people asked what it meant, he said, "Proof that this still matters, that people still care." He added a new rule to the stand. Every customer had to say one good thing about someone else before receiving their cup. No exceptions, no delays. Some hesitated, some struggled, but every single one found something. And in finding it, they remembered something else, who they were. That fall, the governor declared the third Friday in September as Keep Pouring Day, a statewide observance. Schools participated. Local businesses gave free drinks. Churches held open-door services. On the first official Keep Pouring Day, Mikey gave a short speech at the town square. No script, no teleprompter, just his voice, cracking but sure. "We're not here to sell lemonade," he said. "We're here to remind each other what's possible when someone believes in you." A few days later, Mikey received a small brown envelope. Inside was a single card. No handwriting, just embossed text. "Sometimes the greatest leaders are the ones who never ask to be. D." Mikey held it to his chest and closed his eyes. By winter, the stand had been enclosed for the cold. Still open, still serving, but now with heaters and cocoa. And beside it stood a new bench, donated by a couple from Michigan who had driven 9 hours just to sit in front of the booth and pray. They said it reminded them of what church used to feel like, peaceful, real. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump added a final item to the wall of mementos in his private office, a child's drawing, crayon on folded paper. It showed a boy in front of a lemonade stand, shaking hands with a tall man in sunglasses. Above them were 3 words, "Thank you, Mr." Trump stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "You're welcome, kid. You're welcome." The enclosed booth held strong through winter. Snow piled on the roof. Kids wore gloves while they poured cocoa. Mikey rotated the new crew in shifts, 2 at a time, never missing a weekend. He called them the poor team. Each kid had to learn not just how to mix and serve, but how to listen. Because more and more people came not just to buy, but to talk, to cry, to share. It became more than a stand. It became a confessional with a cash jar. And the more stories Mikey heard, the more he understood. Pain didn't care about zip codes. Loneliness didn't care about politics. But kindness, real, personal kindness, could cut through all of it. Trump watched the movement grow from a distance. No interviews, no statements, just a silent hand behind the scenes. He didn't want the credit. He wanted the country to see what was possible when it stopped screaming and started building. He funded 10 more mini-grant waves, launched a shadow mentorship network for kids of first responders, set up supply chains for young entrepreneurs to get bulk materials for half cost. No logo, no branding, just a simple label stamped on every box. Keep pouring. In Hilldale, the school counselor told Mikey something that stopped him in his tracks. She said the local suicide hotline had dropped calls by 40% since the stand had reopened. People feel less invisible now, she said, like they're being seen, even if it's just by a kid with a paper cup. Mikey didn't say anything. He just went home, opened his journal, and wrote, "This matters, even more than I thought." Then came the moment that shook the whole town. A news station, national, showed up unannounced. Somehow, word had gotten out. A popular columnist had published an op-ed titled, "The Boy Who Rebuilt His Town with Lemonade." It didn't name Trump. It didn't need to. The comments section exploded. Some mocked. Most marveled. But Hilldale felt it like a storm front. The town wasn't used to being watched. But Mikey stayed calm. He told the camera crew, "I'm happy to talk, but only if you let the other kids talk too." The producer agreed. They interviewed 4 kids from the poor team, a teacher, Mikey's mom, and a veteran who helped build the new benches. The segment aired the next Sunday. It was short, just 8 minutes, but it hit like lightning. Viewers from around the country emailed the school, donated to the grant program, and sent letters to Mikey. One came from a former senator. One came from a retired teacher in Arizona who sent her pension check with a note, "I never had kids, but I believe in yours." And then another letter arrived. This one hand-delivered by a man in a gray suit. He didn't stay, just walked in, gave it to Mikey's mom, and left. Inside was a formal invite to Washington. Not a ceremony, not a public event. A quiet roundtable with leaders from across the country. Faith leaders, business leaders, parents, principals, and one kid with a lemonade stand. The name at the bottom of the letter wasn't from a government seal. It was typed in bold, capital letters. Hosted by Donald J. Trump. The day before the trip, Mikey received one final item in the mail. A new journal. Leather-bound. No name. No note. Just a card tucked inside that read, "You've poured enough into others. Start pouring into yourself too. Keep writing. D." At the round table, Trump sat across from Mikey and nodded. "You showed us how small choices change everything." Mikey responded quietly, "I just did what I could." Trump leaned forward. "That's exactly why it worked." They didn't speak long, just enough, but it was enough to light another fire. Trump closed the meeting by holding up one of the lemonade cups. He said, "If this little thing can hold something sweet, imagine what our kids can hold when we believe in them." Back home, the booth had been decorated by the community. A banner read, "Welcome back, Captain Poor." Mikey blushed. He didn't feel like a captain, but he smiled anyway. Because in his heart, he knew the truth. He wasn't running a stand anymore. He was building a future. The moment Mikey returned from Washington, the town felt different. Not louder, not busier, just more alive. People walked with purpose. Kids looked up instead of down. The lemonade stand had grown, not in size, but in meaning. It was no longer just a booth. It was a mirror. It showed everyone who they could be. Mikey stood behind the counter that Saturday, like he always did. But this time, when he poured the first cup, he didn't say, "Here you go." He said, "Thanks for being part of this." The man who received it paused, blinked, and said, "No, kid. Thank you for reminding us." Letters still came, from everywhere. One from Alaska, one from an orphanage in West Virginia, one from a boy whose father was deployed. That one hit Mikey hardest. It read, "I used to think no one saw us, but I showed my dad your story before he left. He said, 'Now I know what I'm fighting for.'" Mikey folded the letter and placed it in his special box, marked "Reasons to Keep Going." Meanwhile, Trump reviewed reports from his team. The Lemonade grant had quietly surpassed 10,000 funded projects. No press, no headlines, just handshakes and handwritten notes. One update included a short film made by a group of teens in Indiana called "Stand By Me." It showed their version of the Hilldale booth, built from scraps, run by kids, guarded by values. Trump watched it twice. Then he called a staffer and said, "We're not done. Expand it. More kids, more grants, more heart." Back in Hilldale, the school hosted its first Pour Forward conference. Local leaders, teachers, business owners, and students from across the state gathered in the gymnasium. Folding chairs, paper banners, lemonade in plastic cups. Mikey gave the opening talk. He didn't speak like a child. He spoke like someone who had lived something real. "We didn't fix everything," he said, "but we started, and that matters." A teacher from a nearby town approached him afterward. She held her daughter's hand. "She started a smile stand because of you. She just gives smiles and notes of encouragement. Doesn't charge anything. But people keep giving anyway." Mikey looked at the girl and said, "That's the good kind of contagious." Then something unexpected happened. An elderly man approached the booth one morning. He said he was a retired builder. He didn't speak much, just handed Mikey a wooden frame. Inside was a sketch of the lemonade stand, surrounded by little blueprints of benches, gardens, shelters, schools. At the top it read, "If one booth can do this, imagine what 1,000 could." Mikey stared at it. No words, just the swelling realization that something had begun. Something unstoppable. That evening, Mikey received a phone call. The voice was calm, familiar. "Kid, I saw that blueprint." It was Trump. "We're going to build more, quietly, carefully, and I want your help." Mikey blinked. "My help?" Trump chuckled. "You're the expert. I'm just the guy who stopped for a drink." Mikey laughed. "Deal." Trump added, "We'll call it the Poor Plan. One kid, one town at a time." And so it began. Poor Plan booths appeared in towns most people forgot. Appalachia, dusty corners of New Mexico, flood-damaged plains in Iowa, neighborhoods ignored by news cameras but full of life, full of kids like Mikey, just waiting to be seen. Each stand followed the Hilldale model. Small, simple, symbolic. But each one had a plaque that read, "Founded by Belief. Sustained by Hope." Back in Hilldale, Mikey trained other kids, showed them how to serve, how to smile, how to make someone feel remembered. He didn't try to be a hero. He just tried to be present. Trump sent him a custom binder labeled Field Guide, American Kindness. Inside were blank pages, with a single sentence on the cover sheet. Your turn to write the rest. Fall returned. Leaves tumbled across the sidewalk. Mikey placed a new sign on the stand. This one said, "What started here keeps going out there." A boy on a bike stopped to read it. "What does that mean?" Mikey handed him a cup and said, "It means we're not done yet." Snow came early that year. Hilldale turned quiet under the blanket of white, but the lemonade stand didn't stop. It adapted. Mikey and the poor team served hot cider, warm tea, even peppermint cocoa. Every cup still came with the same rule: say something kind before you receive it. And people did. I forgive my brother. My teacher is a hero. My daughter is stronger than she knows. Each word melted something more powerful than snow. Mikey added a new journal under the counter. This one wasn't for ideas. It was for names. Every name of every person who ever helped, ever showed up, ever offered a hand. He titled the front, "The Real Ones." First name in it, his dad. Second, his mom. Third, Donald. One day, an RV rolled into town with the words, "Keep Pouring Tour," painted on the side. It was driven by a man named Troy, a former contractor from Kentucky. He'd read about Mikey, built his own booth, then another. Then decided to take the model on the road. "Just planting seeds," he told Mikey. "Like you." The two stood in front of the original stand and talked for hours. At the end, Troy said, "You started this. You know that, right?" Mikey shrugged. "I just filled a cup." Troy smiled. "Yeah, but you filled it when nobody else did." That winter, Trump made a rare appearance at a small veterans event in the Midwest. No stage, just a few dozen men and women and a local brass band. After his remarks, a reporter asked about his latest projects. Trump didn't mention buildings or speeches. He said, "There's a boy in a little town with a stand. Changed more lives than most governors." The reporter tried to ask more, but Trump was already walking off, shaking hands and handing out smiles. Back in Hilldale, the school board passed a new tradition. Every graduating class would pour at least one shift at the stand before they received their diploma. It wasn't about sales, it was about service. A rite of passage. Senior day at the pour booth. Mikey stood on the sidelines, watching the first batch of teens laugh, stumble, and learn how to connect without screens. He wrote in his journal that night, "This will outlive me. That's how I know it's real." Then came the flood. A burst pipe from upstream. Heavy rains. It was fast, violent, unexpected. The lower part of town flooded. The garden washed away. The cider station destroyed. For a moment, it felt like the end. Mikey stood knee-deep in water, holding a piece of the broken stand. But before he could grieve, people arrived. Dozens, shovels, buckets, hands. A woman shouted, "This stand helped my family. Now we help it." Another man said, "We rebuild, because that's what this taught us." By sundown, the pieces were gathered, the foundation reset, the posts replaced, the flag raised again. Someone brought a battery-powered lantern and wrote "Still Pouring" on the front. Mikey didn't cry. He just stood there, soaking wet, hand on heart, and whispered, "Thank you." 2 days later, a delivery truck pulled in. Inside, pre-cut wood panels, industrial-strength siding, insulation, a small wood stove. No invoice, just a letter. "Weather can shake us, but we don't break. Donald." Mikey built the new booth with his dad, by hand. Stronger, taller, smarter. At the top, they etched a new phrase: "The stand that stood." That spring, the movement entered its fourth year. 1,000 booths across the nation. 15,000 kids helped. 50,000 cups poured. But it wasn't about the numbers. It never had been. It was about one cup, one town, one man who pulled over when he didn't have to, and what happened because he did. One morning, Mikey found a book wrapped in brown paper beneath the counter. No tag, no name. The cover was blank except for one gold-embossed line. Greatness is simple. It shows up. Inside were pages filled with photos, letters, stories from every booth built under the poor plan, notes from veterans, kids, nurses, teachers. The final page was a photo of Mikey, age 10, handing that very first cup to a man in sunglasses and a windbreaker. The caption read, "Where it started." He closed the book, breathed deep, and said aloud, "It's not over. Not even close." Spring turned into summer and the stand stood tall, stronger now, weatherproof, reinforced. But the soul of it, the cup, the kindness, the reason, never changed. Mikey was older now, taller, more confident. He didn't pour every cup himself anymore. He trained others, taught kids how to look people in the eye, how to listen, how to serve without needing applause. They called him Coach, even though he never asked for the title. Every once in a while, he'd still step behind the counter, just to remind himself where it started. The poor plan had become a movement. No slogans, no branding deals, just values that spread like sunrise across small towns. America wasn't louder because of it. It was quieter, more steady, more present. In towns that the media forgot, lemonade booths popped up beside churches, gas stations, and baseball fields. Not one was exactly the same, but all of them shared the same plaque. Keep pouring. One weekend, a young boy named Caleb visited the Hilldale booth with his mom. He wore a worn hoodie, quiet eyes, and a notebook he never let go of. Mikey noticed him watching everything. Not just the drinks, but the way people stood straighter after being served. The way adults smiled a little longer. Mikey walked over and asked, "You thinking of starting your own?" Caleb nodded slowly. "I just want people to feel okay again." Mikey pulled a poor plan starter kit from under the counter and handed it to him. "Start with one cup," he said. "The rest will follow." That night, Mikey wrote in his journal, "Found the next one." Meanwhile, in Florida, Trump reviewed another monthly update. The number of stands had doubled again. One had even opened on a reservation in South Dakota, run by two teenage sisters raising money for their elders. Another appeared in a Bronx housing project, run by three boys who'd seen too much violence, but poured hope with every cup. Trump stared at the photos for a long time. Then he opened a drawer labeled Legacy. Inside, just one item, a photo of that first lemonade booth taped to a piece of paper that read, "This is how you change a country." Mikey was invited to speak at a national youth summit that summer. DC cameras, politicians, big stage, big expectations, but he kept it simple. He stepped up to the podium and said, "Don't wait for someone else to fix the world. Just find your corner, fill your cup, and serve." The room went still, then rose in a standing ovation. After the speech, a woman from South Carolina approached. She said her son had struggled with depression until he joined a local poor team. "You didn't just save your town," she said. "You saved my child." Mikey thanked her, shook her hand, and wrote down her story to remember later. He never let himself forget why it mattered. Back in Hilldale, a new structure was added behind the booth. A training center, small but sturdy, built by volunteers, funded anonymously. Its only sign read, "The Poorhouse, where future leaders learn to serve." Mikey taught weekend workshops there, not just how to run a booth, but how to lead with humility, how to work with your hands, how to pray when you don't know what else to do. Trump sent a framed quote to hang on the wall. "True greatness is what you build when nobody is watching." It hung above the doorway like a quiet commandment. That fall, a new student joined Mikey's school. He was quiet, poor, wore the same shirt 3 days in a row. Bullies started to circle. Mikey noticed, stepped in, sat with him at lunch, brought him to the booth, gave him an apron. Within weeks, the kid was smiling, grades rising, life slowly turning. That boy, Jonah, would go on to build the 2000th Poor Plan booth. When the day came, Mikey drove 4 hours to be there. No speech, just a quiet nod as Jonah poured his first cup. Jonah looked up, a little nervous, and asked, "What if no one shows up?" Mikey answered, "You did. That's what counts." That evening, a letter arrived at the Hilldale booth. Handwritten, heavy stock, from Mar-a-Lago. "Heard about the 2000th booth. That's not a number. That's a miracle. Proud of you. Donald." Mikey held the letter in one hand and the original coin in the other. The weight of both reminded him. It was never about him. It was about what he started and who he chose to become. The leaves turned again, and with them came a new milestone. 5 years since the first cup was poured. Mikey stood in front of the original booth, now preserved behind plexiglass like a museum exhibit. The counter still held faint stains, the sign still slightly crooked. He didn't want it perfect. He wanted it real. A small crowd gathered for the anniversary. Old friends, new supporters, kids who'd started stands across the country. One of them read a poem. Another brought a flag signed by every poor team in the nation. Mikey didn't speak much. He just raised his cup and said, "Still pouring." That week, a letter arrived from a father in Kansas. His daughter had started a booth after watching Mikey's D.C. speech. She had been bullied, withdrawn, barely speaking. But after running the booth for 3 months, she was smiling, inviting friends, and had started reading the Bible again. The father wrote, "You reached her in a way no doctor could. You gave her back to us." Mikey added the letter to a binder labeled Miracles. It was full now, every page proof that goodness could multiply if someone just believed enough to start. Meanwhile, Trump was reflecting. Sitting alone on the veranda, the Florida air warm, the wind light. A staffer had just finished briefing him on a new partnership. The Poor Plan was quietly being adopted by a network of trade schools to train kids in real-world service, craftsmanship, and entrepreneurship. Trump didn't say much, just looked out over the water and whispered, "Let the kids lead." We had our turn. In Hilldale, a documentary team quietly visited the booth. Mikey wasn't sure about it, but they promised no politics, no angle, just truth. They filmed for 2 days, captured laughter, tears, a girl paying with quarters, an old man who had come every Saturday for 4 years without missing a cup. When asked what he liked about it, he said, "It reminds me what America used to feel like." The documentary aired late on a Sunday night. No ads, no hype, but millions watched. One comment said, "I cried, and then I got up and started building something." Another read, "We didn't lose our country. We just stopped looking in the right places." And one simply said, "Thank you, Mikey. And thank you, Mr. Trump. We needed this." The booth didn't change. Still handmade signs, still cash in a jar, still kids learning how to serve. But something deeper had settled over Hilldale. It wasn't just a town anymore. It was a model, a living testimony. Churches hosted poor nights. Mayors from across the state visited the training center. The governor's office issued a commendation that simply read, "One boy, one cup, one nation reminded." One evening, Mikey walked the perimeter of the property as the sun dipped behind the trees. He paused at the garden, then at the bench where his dad used to sit. He saw a new generation of kids laughing behind the booth, mixing up a fresh pitcher. He smiled and felt something quiet settle inside him. Not pride, not ego, just peace. Inside the booth that night, a note had been left on the counter, folded. No envelope, just a simple message on thick cream paper. "Keep showing them. They're still watching, and so am I. Donald." Mikey turned off the lights, locked the booth, and looked up at the sky. He didn't say anything, just placed a hand on his chest and nodded once. Because he understood now. The booth was never about lemonade. It was about light in a dark time. It was about starting small when the world felt too big. It was about what happens when a leader pulls over. A storm came through in the middle of the night, not like the one years ago that nearly wiped the stand out. This one was stronger. Lightning cracked across the valley. Winds howled through Hilldale like a warning. But when the morning sun rose and the sky settled, the booth still stood. Not a board broken, not a sign torn. The flag above it damp but flying. Mikey walked up in silence, hand brushing the side, and whispered, "Still here." The townspeople noticed. They said it was a sign that what had been built wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. They weren't just protecting a lemonade stand anymore. They were protecting what it meant. A school teacher put it best. She said, "This booth doesn't just serve cups. It serves conviction." Mikey had grown now, not just in age but in posture. He spoke to mayors, sat in on education panels, got letters from governors and grandparents. But he never changed his routine. Still poured once a week. Still cleaned the booth himself. Still answered every kid who asked for advice. One boy asked, "What if nobody shows up?" Mikey said, "You show up first. That's the part that matters." Meanwhile, in a quiet room lined with flags and framed moments, Donald Trump reviewed blueprints. Not for towers, not for hotels, for something else. A national model called the American Corner. Each would be modeled after the original Hilldale booth. Modular, simple, locally run. Part community hub, part classroom, part service center. No bureaucracy, no noise, just a place where Americans could reconnect with one another, face to face, cup by cup. The first three broke ground in Ohio, Texas, and South Carolina. No ribbon cuttings, no headlines, just kids opening boxes marked "Keep Pouring," and adults remembering what it felt like to believe again. Back in Hilldale, a girl named Elsie had just started her first shift. Nervous hands, crooked apron. Mikey stood beside her. She whispered, "What if I mess up?" He smiled and said, "That's how we learn." She nodded, poured her first cup, and the customer smiled like it was the best thing he'd had all week. That night, the sky was clear. Mikey sat on the bench beside the booth, notebook in hand, flipping through the early pages of what had become 5 full journals. He stopped on a sentence written years ago. "What if this matters more than I think?" He smiled, because now he knew it did. Then came the message. Delivered not by mail, not by a stranger, by a boy on a bike who said he was told to bring it straight to the source. The envelope was navy with a gold seal. Inside, a card with 5 words. It worked. They're waking up. Donald. Mikey didn't tell anyone. He didn't frame it. He didn't tweet it. He just slipped it into the last page of Journal 5 and wrote underneath it, "Mission still in progress." Fall returned. A cool breeze danced through town. People came from farther away now. Journalists, pastors, single moms, Vietnam vets. Everyone who came to Hilldale walked away saying the same thing. I thought this kind of America was gone. Turns out, it was just waiting to be believed in, again. The Hilldale booth became the prototype for something much bigger. Not because it was flashy, but because it worked. One town at a time, one child at a time, one act of faith at a time. And behind it all, always watching, always nudging quietly from the background, was the man who pulled over that day when nobody expected it. One final touch was added to the booth before winter. A small brass plaque placed low, just above the counter's edge where kids could see it. It read, "This is what happens when someone believes in you before you believe in yourself." And underneath, in small engraved print, a signature, Donald J. Trump. The brass plaque became something of a pilgrimage point. People knelt beside it, touched it, took photos with it, not because it was shiny, but because it told the truth. That belief, quiet, unannounced, unselfish, can change everything. Mikey never mentioned the plaque unless someone asked, but when they did, he'd smile and say, "That was his idea. I just kept showing up." Elsewhere, the American Corner Initiative began catching momentum. More towns adopted the model. Local versions of the Hilldale stand appeared at county fairs, rest stops, and even state parks. No politics, just people serving people. Veterans mentoring kids, grandmas baking cookies, teens sweeping sidewalks. All tied together by one unshakable phrase: keep pouring. A senator from North Dakota called it the most quietly powerful movement in modern American history. Trump kept watching from a distance. He didn't make speeches about it. He didn't put his name on the banners. But he read every impact report, every note, every testimony. One letter, handwritten in green ink by a teenage girl in Oklahoma, said, "I thought I had nothing to give. Then I started pouring, and I found out I had everything." Trump underlined that sentence and placed it beside a photo of the Hilldale stand, pinned on his office wall, right next to a faded note that simply read, "Faith wins." Mikey had just turned 16. He could drive now, but he still walked to the booth every Saturday. Said it helped him think, helped him remember who he was. He had started mentoring other kids beyond Hilldale. Zoom calls, road trips, quiet visits. He never traveled with an entourage. Just a duffel bag, a Bible, and a backpack full of story folders labeled Ideas That Matter. One night at a church revival in Tennessee, Mikey gave a short talk. Just 15 minutes. He spoke about service, about faith, about what happens when you give without needing to be seen. When he finished, a pastor approached him with tears in his eyes. "You don't preach like a teenager," he said. Mikey smiled. "That's because I don't preach. I pour." Back home, something new was beginning. The town council had voted to build a permanent community space behind the booth. Not a government building, a training hall, a legacy hub. Its name was chosen unanimously, the Pour Center. It would house journals, letters, and serve as a launching point for future booths, ideas, and dreams. When Mikey broke ground with the shovel, he didn't make a speech. He just whispered one word: continue. That winter, Trump's team sent Mikey a custom time capsule kit. Heavy duty, airtight. Inside was a card. Fill this with what matters now. Let the next generation find it when they're ready. D. Mikey spent weeks curating what to place inside. The original marker sign, the first $100 bill, his first apron, a map with pins where every booth had been started, one page from Journal 1, and a recording of his voice saying, "You matter. You're seen. Keep pouring." They buried it beneath the new foundation. News eventually broke. A national article titled, "The Boy, the Booth, and the Belief That Didn't Quit." It made headlines. But Mikey didn't do interviews, didn't go on TV. When asked why, he said, "The booth speaks for itself. I'm just the one who showed up first." And then, one evening, another letter arrived. This time sealed with gold foil. No words inside, just a coin. One side showed a lemonade cup. The other, an eagle holding a scroll that read, "Legacy Delivered." Mikey turned it in his hand, heart thudding. He understood now. This wasn't just a chapter in his life. This was the blueprint. Back in Florida, Trump stood at the edge of his property at sunset. Wind rolling across the lawn. He held the final copy of the Poor Plan Handbook. He didn't speak, just nodded once, firm and satisfied. Then he handed it off to a staffer and said, "Make more copies. Get them into hands that still believe." The first snow of the season fell soft and steady. The booth stayed open. It always did. The heater inside kept the cider warm and the kids smiling. Mikey stepped behind the counter like it was the first day all over again. A little boy approached, no taller than the counter, holding 2 quarters in his mittened hand. "Is it true this started with a president?" he asked. Mikey smiled. "It started with a kid and a cup. But yeah, a president pulled over." The boy grinned wide. "That's awesome." Mikey handed him the cup and said, "So are you." Inside the new Poor Center, construction was nearly complete. The walls held framed letters, quotes, photos of booths across the nation, a wall of names, not donors, not celebrities, just first names of every kid who started a stand. In the middle of the lobby, set under a spotlight, was a replica of the original booth, slightly worn, purposefully imperfect. At its base, engraved in stone, one decision, one act of belief, one unstoppable ripple. Meanwhile, Trump reviewed his end-of-year report, quietly, privately, not for broadcast, just for legacy. The numbers were staggering: 2,700 stands, 44,000 kids involved, more than 6 million cups poured. But what stood out most was the final stat. Volunteer hours logged by poor teams, over 1 million. Trump stared at that number. "They gave what most adults won't," he said aloud. Then he circled the figure and wrote, "This is how we win." Back in Hilldale, Mikey received an invitation to speak at a university commencement. He almost declined, said he wasn't a scholar. But the chancellor insisted. "We don't need theory," she wrote. "We need reminders of what works." Mikey spoke for 10 minutes. No notes, no teleprompter, just a clear voice and a simple truth. Every great thing starts when someone shows up to serve. When he stepped down, the audience didn't just clap, they stood, and many cried. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached. She had watched the segment about Mikey years ago and started volunteering at her local food bank because of it. "I'm 82, she said, "but I figured if a 10-year-old boy could stand outside and pour into people, I could hand out soup and prayers." Mikey smiled, held her hand, and said, "You're why this works." That winter, the White House reached out, quietly, not to offer awards, just to ask questions. How did this spread? Why did it resonate? What's the model? Mikey responded in a single-page letter. It's not the model, it's the heart. People aren't lost. They're just looking for a reason to show up. Trump read that response, twice. Then he called a former cabinet member and said, "Give the next generation space to build. They already have the blueprint." Then he returned to his office, lit by soft light, and opened a drawer marked Unfinished. Inside, a notebook titled Things I Didn't Say. He turned to a blank page and wrote, "To the kid who saved more than a town. You reminded America what it's made of. I see it now. We were never divided. We were just waiting for someone small to lead big." D. Back in Hilldale, a new kid named Luke had just joined the pour team. On his first shift, he asked Mikey, "What do I do if someone's rude?" Mikey looked at him and said, "Pour anyway." Sometimes the people who need kindness the most are the ones who forgot how to ask for it. That night, snow fell harder. The wind picked up. But the booth's lights stayed on. Warm. Bright. Ready. And in Florida, a man who once held the highest office in the land stood alone beneath the stars, holding a photo of a 10-year-old boy pouring a cup of lemonade to a stranger with sunglasses and a hidden heart full of purpose. Because that's how it started. And that's how it would continue. Spring came early. Birds returned to Hilldale before the frost fully let go. And with them came a new wave of kids eager to join the pour team. Some had never heard the full story. Others knew it by heart. Mikey didn't tell it often. He didn't need to. The booth told it for him. The weathered wood, the coin on the shelf, the brass plaque that had inspired more hope than most speeches. New hands poured now, but the spirit never changed. Kindness first, humility always, and service above all. One girl named Grace took her shifts seriously. Only 12. But her notes on customers were legendary. She remembered names, favorite drinks, prayer requests. She taped sticky notes under the counter that read, "Mrs. K's back hurts," or "Ben misses his dad." Mikey called her the next wave. She called him Coach. On her 4th week, she asked, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Mikey didn't ask who. He just said, "I think he never really left." Meanwhile, in a quiet room in Florida, Trump watched a short video, sent by a volunteer in Nebraska. A group of kids, 6 of them, opening a new booth. In the background, a handmade banner that read, "Hilldale made us believe." One of the boys saluted before pouring the first cup. Trump didn't speak, just leaned back in his chair and let the moment sit. Then he opened a box labeled Final Letters. Inside, a single envelope marked "For Mikey, when it's time." In Hilldale, the Pour Center had added 2 new rooms, one for training, one for quiet prayer. People came from out of state to walk the grounds, tour buses, youth groups, veterans on motorcycles. Each one walked away a little softer, a little stronger, a little more convinced that the country still had a pulse. One vet stood in front of the booth, tears streaming down his face, and said, "I haven't felt this proud to be an American since I came home from Vietnam." Mikey handed him a cup and said, "Then we're doing something right." That summer, a special session was held in the state legislature. Lawmakers proposed a resolution declaring Hilldale the heartbeat of American renewal. It passed unanimously. The governor sent a letter personally signed. But the real moment came when a reporter asked Mikey how it felt. He replied, "Titles are fine, but I'm just trying to live out a thank you." And then came the visit. No warning, no press. Just a black SUV pulling up quietly one morning. A man stepped out. Sunglasses, familiar walk. Mikey was behind the booth, looked up, smiled, said, You thirsty? Trump nodded. Always. Mikey poured, handed over the cup. Trump took a sip. Still the best in the country, he said. Then he leaned in. It's time. Mikey nodded. Trump handed over the envelope from the box marked Final Letters. They sat on the bench beside the booth for 15 minutes. No cameras, just two leaders, one who had led the country and one who had led it back to itself. Trump said, "You did more than inspire. You rebuilt faith. That's heavier than office. And you carried it well." Mikey said, "I only ever wanted to help my dad." Trump looked him in the eye. "And you helped a nation." When the SUV pulled away, Mikey opened the letter. It was handwritten. "You didn't pour lemonade. You poured light. You didn't lead with force. You led with faith. America didn't need noise. It needed you. And you showed up. That's what makes a leader. Not title, not fame, just choice. I made mine. You made yours. And now we keep going. Keep pouring. Donald. That night, Mikey added the letter to a new box. Not labeled proof. Not legacy. Just one word. Continue. Because this wasn't the end. This was the passing of the torch. The final summer arrived like a slow sunrise, calm, bright, full of promise. The Hilldale booth stood unchanged, still serving, still steady, but the roots it had planted stretched farther than any map could show. Schools in Alaska had poor teams. Churches in Texas built lemonade altars beside food banks. Single moms in Ohio started Poor Nights, where families shared prayer and cocoa beneath strings of lights. A quiet revolution, cup by cup, and it all traced back to one boy, one booth, and a moment of unexpected grace on a dusty roadside. Mikey was 18 now, still humble, still showing up, but preparing to leave. A scholarship had been offered, a full ride, leadership and service studies. He had hesitated, afraid the booth might lose its soul if he stepped away. But his dad said something that stuck. The booth is strong because you poured your spirit into it. Now it pours into others. It's ready. Mikey nodded, packed his bag, left the original apron behind, folded neatly, framed in the pour center under the heading, First Shift. Before leaving, he trained his team. Not just how to pour, but how to listen, how to hold the hard stories, how to answer hate with calm, how to say thank you like it was a prayer. Then, on his last morning in Hilldale, he walked alone to the booth, placed a note under the counter. Simple handwriting. Keep pouring. Because someone out there needs the next cup more than they'll ever say. The town held a quiet send-off, not a parade, just friends, neighbors, a circle of candles around the booth. One by one, they placed their cups at the base, empty, symbolic, a reminder that someone had poured for them, and now they would do the same. Across the country, Trump sat in a quiet office, the sun setting behind him. A new letter in hand. From Mikey. No request. Just gratitude. You believed in a nobody kid with a cardboard sign and a beat-up table. You didn't just pull over. You showed me what leadership really looks like. Trump folded the letter, placed it in a folder labeled Finished Work, and wrote one final line across the inside cover. We rebuilt the soul of the country, and we did it with a cup. That fall, the Pour Center installed a permanent exhibit. One screen played the original security footage of the first moment, Trump pulling over, handing the bill, walking away. The caption read, "He asked for nothing. He changed everything." Years later, children still visited the booth, now maintained by teens who hadn't been born when it all began. But they knew the story. They pointed to the plaque, to the journal archives, to the first sign. And when someone asked, "Is it true the president started this?" the answer was always the same. Number, he didn't start it. He believed in it, and that was enough. Mikey, now grown, wrote books, spoke occasionally, still visited Hilldale when he could, but he always wore the same bracelet made from booth wood and engraved with the words, "Keep pouring." He never took it off. And in Florida, older now, Trump kept one photo on his wall, the one of Mikey's very first pour, the boy, the cup, the future in one simple act. Because in the end, it wasn't about politics. It was about presence, about choosing to stop, to believe, to pour. And that's how America remembered who she was. One cup at a time. And that's where this chapter ends. But the pouring doesn't stop. Because every American matters. Every act of kindness counts. And sometimes, all it takes is one person showing up when no one else does. Where are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments. If this story of quiet leadership, second chances, and small-town hope meant something to you, be sure to like the video and hit subscribe. We share powerful, real-world stories like this every week. Share it with someone who could use a reminder that even the smallest act can change everything. Your support helps keep these stories alive and pouring into hearts across the country. Thanks for watching, and keep pouring. We'll see you in the next one.